From mysterious roommates who vanish without a trace, to hostels with rooms that shouldn't exist, to encounters that blur the line between the living and the dead. These stories come from real people who lived through experiences that changed them forever. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for true scary hostel stories that will make you question what really lurks in those shadowy corners of budget accommodations around the world. I've been backpacking for 7 years, stayed in hundreds of hostels across 6 continents. I thought I'd seen everything from bedbugs in Bangkok to theft in Barcelona, from drunken roommates to broken air conditioning in the middle of summer. But nothing prepared me for the Pension Oleander in Prague's lesser town. It wasn't even supposed to be a hostel. The listing on booking sites was vague, describing it as budget accommodation for independent travelers, with shared facilities and authentic local experience. The photos showed a beautiful 18th century building with ornate facade and charming interior courtyards. For €30 a night in one of Europe's most expensive cities, it seemed too good to be true. It was. I arrived on a rainy October evening, following GPS coordinates to a narrow cobblestone street lined with historic buildings. Pension Oleander stood out immediately, not for its beauty, but for its decay. The facade that looked pristine in photos was crumbling, with dark stains running down from every window like tears. Several ground floor windows were boarded up, and the ornate entrance door hung slightly askew on rusted hinges. But I was tired, soaked from the rain, and my other accommodation had fallen through at the last minute. I pushed through the heavy door into a dimly lit foyer that smelled of mild dew and something else. Something organic and unpleasant. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. Footsteps approached from somewhere deeper in the building, slow and irregular. An elderly man emerged from the shadows, bent with age and using a walking stick carved from dark wood. His eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost colorless, and they studied me with uncomfortable intensity. "You must be Marcus," he said in heavily accented English. "I am Victor, proprietor of Pension Oleander. We have been expecting you." Something about the way he said we made me uneasy, but I attributed it to the language barrier. I followed him through a maze of narrow corridors lined with faded photographs and dusty furniture. The building felt much larger inside than it appeared from the street, with multiple levels connected by creaking staircases and unexpected turns. "Your room is on 3rd floor," Victor explained as we climbed. "Shared bathroom at end of hall. Kitchen on 2nd floor, if you wish to cook. Breakfast not included, but there are cafes nearby." He stopped at a door marked with a tarnished brass 7 and produced a skeleton key from his pocket. The room beyond was Spartan but clean. A single bed, small desk, narrow wardrobe, and a window overlooking an interior courtyard. Basic but adequate for a few nights. "Other guests are quiet," Victor said, handing me the key. "Most are long-term residents. They appreciate peace and privacy." "How many others are staying here?" I asked, setting down my backpack. Victor paused in the doorway, considering. "Difficult to say exactly. People come and go. Some stay longer than expected." His pale eyes fixed on mine again. "How long will you be with us, Marcus?" 3 nights, I replied. "Maybe 4 if I decide to extend." Something that might have been a smile crossed his weathered face. "Yes, 3 nights. Perfect." After he left, I explored my surroundings. The shared bathroom was ancient, but functional, with a clawfoot tub and pipes that groaned when I turned on the tap. The kitchen downstairs was a museum piece. Cast iron stove, ceramic sink, copper pots hanging from hooks. Everything looked original to the building's construction, as if time had stopped sometime in the early 20th century. But it was the photographs that truly unsettled me. Every wall, every surface, every available space was covered with framed pictures. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, spanning decades of photography. Black and white portraits from the 1920s, faded color snapshots from the 1960s, Polaroids from the 1980s, and more recent digital prints all showed the same thing. Travelers, young people with backpacks, older tourists with cameras, solo adventurers and traveling couples, all posed in front of Pension Oleander, all smiling at the camera with that particular expression of excitement that comes from exploring a new place. What struck me as odd was the consistency. Despite spanning nearly a century, every photo showed people wearing remarkably similar expressions. Not just happy or excited, but something deeper, a look of completion, of having found exactly what they were searching for. And in every single photograph, partially visible in the background, stood Victor, unchanged, unaged. The same bent figure with pale eyes and carved walking stick, watching from the shadows of the pension's entrance. That first night, I barely slept. The building was full of sounds, footsteps in the corridors, voices through thin walls, doors opening and closing at all hours. But when I ventured out to use the bathroom around 2 a.m., the hallways were empty. Every room I passed was silent, doors closed, no light showing beneath them. The next morning, I asked Victor about the other guests. "Ah yes, they are early risers," he said, polishing glasses behind a small bar area I hadn't noticed before. "Most leave before sunrise to explore city. They are very dedicated travelers. I'd like to meet some of them. Maybe get recommendations for local places to visit." Victor's expression became thoughtful. "Perhaps tonight. They are usually more social in evening hours." I spent the day exploring Prague, but found myself distracted by thoughts of the pension. Those photographs bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. When I searched online for Pension Oleander Prague, I found very few results, just basic booking information, and a handful of reviews, all glowing but strangely generic. "Authentic experience," one read. "Exactly what I was looking for. The proprietor really understands travelers," said another. "I felt like I belonged there. Stayed much longer than planned," wrote a third. "Didn't want to leave." But when I tried to find the reviewers' profiles, most led to dead links or accounts that hadn't been active in years. It was as if they'd simply vanished after posting their reviews. That evening, I returned to find Victor setting up an elaborate camera on a tripod in the foyer. An old-fashioned film camera with flashbulbs and brass fittings, the kind used by professional photographers decades ago. "Ah, Marcus," he called cheerfully. "Perfect timing. Would you pose for photograph for our guest book?" "I'd rather not," I said quickly. Something about the camera, about the idea of my image being captured in that place, filled me with dread. Victor's smile faltered slightly. "But all guests pose for photograph. It is tradition. Look," he gestured to the walls of framed pictures. "Everyone who stays at Pension Oleander becomes part of our family." "Maybe tomorrow," I compromised, heading toward the stairs. "Of course," Victor said, but his pale eyes followed me with new intensity. Tomorrow, that night, the sounds were worse. Not just footsteps and voices, but specific conversations bleeding through the walls. I heard a woman discussing travel plans that mentioned prices and places from the 1970s. A man spoke excitedly about seeing Prague before the revolution, but his English had a contemporary accent, not the formal speech patterns of someone actually from that era. Most disturbing was a conversation between what sounded like a group of travelers planning their next destination. They mentioned hostels in cities that no longer existed under the names they used, discussed transportation options that had been discontinued decades ago. It was as if they were stuck in time forever, planning trips they would never take. Around 3 a.m., curiosity overcame caution. I crept into the hallway to investigate. The voices were coming from room 12, just down the corridor. Light showed beneath the door, and I could hear at least 4 different people talking and laughing. I knocked softly. The conversation stopped immediately. After a long moment, Footsteps approached the door, but it didn't open. "Hello?" I whispered. "Who's there?" came a young woman's voice, sounding puzzled. "I'm Marcus, from room 7. I'm staying here too." Silence again, then hushed conferring I couldn't make out. "We don't know any Marcus," the woman finally said. "Are you sure you're in the right place? I'm a guest here, same as you." "That's impossible," said a man's voice now. "We're the only guests. We've been the only guests for..." The voices trailed off into confused murmuring. I heard them discussing something urgently, but couldn't make out the word. Then the light under the door went out, and the room fell silent. The next morning, Victor was waiting for me in the foyer with his camera still set up. "Good morning, Marcus. Ready for your photograph now?" I tried to deflect again, asking about the guests in room 12. Victor's expression became carefully neutral. "Room 12? That room is not occupied. Has not been used in some time. I heard people talking there last night. I spoke to them through the door." "Perhaps you were dreaming," Victor suggested. "Old buildings make many sounds, easy to mistake them for voices." But his pale eyes held a different story. He knew exactly what I'd heard. That afternoon, while Victor was away from the building, I decided to investigate. I tried the handle of room 12 and found it unlocked. The room beyond was identical to mine. Single bed, desk, wardrobe, but covered in dust and clearly unused for months, possibly years. Yet on the desk sat fresh flowers in a water glass, a half-eaten apple brown with oxidation but still fragrant, a map of Prague spread out with locations circled in different colored pens, the ink still wet to the touch. And on the bed, as if someone had just stepped out for a moment, lay clothes that looked decades old but smelled of recent wear. I backed out of the room quickly, my mind struggling to process what I'd seen. Objects that couldn't exist together, fresh and decades old simultaneously, used but abandoned, present but impossible. That evening, Victor cornered me again about the photograph. "It is important tradition," he insisted. "All guests must be documented. How else will people know you were here?" "Why is it so important to you?" I asked. Victor leaned heavily on his walking stick, studying me with those unsettling pale eyes. "Pension Oleander has been my life's work," he said finally. "For 70 years I have welcomed travelers from around the world. Each one brings something unique. Their energy, their stories, their dreams of adventure." 70 years? How old are you? He ignored the question. "The photographs preserve their essence, keep their memories alive. Without them, it is as if they never existed at all." Something in his tone chilled me. "What happened to them? The people in all these photos?" Victor's smile returned, but it was cold now. Predatory. They found what they were looking for. All travelers seek the same thing, Marcus. A place where they belong, where they can stop running from themselves. Pension Oleander provides that. By trapping them, by completing them, he corrected. Each photograph captures the moment they realize their journey is over. The moment they understand they need never leave. I started backing toward the stairs, every instinct screaming danger. "I'm checking out tomorrow. Are you?" Victor asked mildly. "How interesting. That is what they all say. Eventually, though, they realize leaving is impossible." "What do you mean?" "You have been here 3 nights now, Marcus. According to my experience, that is precisely when travelers discover they cannot find the exit." I turned and ran for the door, but the foyer had changed. Where the entrance should have been was solid wall covered in more photographs. The windows I'd seen from my room were now also walls, displaying endless images of smiling traveler. "The building adapts," Victor explained, following me slowly with his irregular gait. "It grows to accommodate new residents. Room 12 was created for the group you heard last night. Room 15 appeared when the elderly couple arrived, and Room 23 materialized for the solo traveler who came seeking his lost love." "This is impossible," I gasped, running my hands along the wall where the door had been. "Nothing is impossible for those who truly understand hospitality." Victor said, "I learned long ago that the best service means giving guests exactly what they need, whether they realize it or not. I need to leave." "Do you? You came to Prague alone, Marcus." No family waiting for you, no job holding you back, no permanent address. You told me yourself you have been traveling for 7 years, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. His words hit like physical blows because they were true. I was running from something, from the emptiness of a life without purpose, from the fear that I'd never find a place where I belonged. Pension oleander gives meaning to meaningless lives, Victor continued. All my guests were like you, lost souls seeking something they could not name. Here, they find it. By becoming prisoners, by becoming eternal, he corrected. Their stories live on in photographs. Their energy feeds the building, helps it grow and adapt for new arrivals. They are part of something larger than themselves. The camera was between us now, positioned and ready. Victor moved behind it with surprising speed for someone his age. One photograph, he said. Just one moment of perfect completion. Then you will join the others, and your journey will finally have meaning. I could hear them now. The voices from all the rooms. All the guests who had checked in but never checked out. They were calling to me, welcoming me, promising that the loneliness would end if I just stood still for one moment. If I just let Victor capture my essence on film. The camera's flash filled the foyer with brilliant white light. When my vision cleared, I was standing in the Prague airport, boarding pass in my hand, backpack at my feet. Confused and disoriented, I looked around for any sign of Victor or the pension oleander, but there was nothing. No memory of how I'd gotten there. No explanation for the lost time. It wasn't until I was on the plane that I noticed the photograph in my jacket pocket. A black and white image of me standing in an ornate foyer, smiling with that same expression of completion I'd seen on the faces of hundreds of other travelers. In the background, barely visible, stood a bent figure with pale eyes and a carved walking stick. On the back of the photograph, in spidery handwriting, someone had written, Marcus R., Australia. Stayed 3 nights. Found what he was looking for. I tried researching the pension oleander when I got home, but found no trace of it online. The booking sites I'd used showed no record of my reservation or payment. The narrow cobblestone street existed, but the address where the pension should have been was occupied by a modern apartment building. But sometimes late at night, I hear voices through my walls, travelers discussing plans for places that no longer exist, comparing notes about journeys they'll never complete. And I know that somewhere in Prague, in a building that exists between memory and reality, Victor is still welcoming lost souls, still setting up his camera, still collecting travelers who think they're just looking for a place to sleep. If you ever find yourself booking accommodation that seems too good to be true, if you encounter a proprietor who insists on photographing all guests, if you discover a place where other travelers speak of journeys that don't quite make sense, leave immediately. Some collections should never be completed, and some photographs capture more than just images. They capture souls.